Now, very frankly, what was being spent on defense was as a result of Republican budgets over the last number of years. So that it's hard for me to believe that they would vote for budgets and appropriation bills that they thought was undermining defense. But in any event, we increased that substantially. And yes, we increased spending on education, on health care, opioids in particular, other items on emergency relief, which the leader and I visited Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, Texas, Florida, needed assistance, and we passed that as well. But very frankly, we didn't pay for any of it. We hear about spending. Whatever the spending level is, we ought to pay for it. That would be my position. And if we want to spend the money, we ought to pay for it. Now, however, I hope these rescissions do not set a precedent whereby future negotiations will be put at great risk because at least one party will not trust that the negotiations are real. When Ryan Murray was agreed to by the Speaker Ryan and by Senator Murray, shortly after that agreement was reached as to what spending levels would be, some of my Republican colleagues came back and said, oh, well, there's ceilings. It's like my bargaining to buy a house for $100,000, and then I come back at the settlement table and say, well, I'm really going to pay $75,000. $100,000 was just a ceiling on what I was going to pay for that house. That doesn't make any sense. Nobody would think it makes any sense. So I will tell my friend, the Majority Leader, I hope that the rescissions are based upon the sort of example that he gave, and therefore it may receive some support. But if they are simply to reverse hard bargained results, then I think that will put at risk any kind of bipartisan negotiations that may occur in the future. Very frankly, the budget is, and I'm going to ask the gentleman about the budget now, is supposed to come down pretty soon. As a matter of fact, it's supposed to be reported out of the Budget Committee by now and supposed to be passed by the Congress by April 15th or 17th, depending upon which date you use, but sometime this month. Does the Majority Leader have any? No, submit to the record. Does the Majority Leader have any reason to believe that we're going to pass over the next 2 weeks a budget and send it to the Senate that is balanced? And I yield to my friend.
I thank the gentleman from Ely. If I first may answer the other questions you raised. First of all, when you talk about trust, everybody should know what happens when you get to an omni and why. We had an omni not because of this House. We had an omni not because of this majority. We passed all 12 appropriation bills. The last time that was done by a Republican majority, the iPhone wasn't invented. We sent it to the Senate.
Excuse me.
And you know the sad part? I said Republican majority, so. The last time when we sent it to the Senate, maybe the debate, and they debated the bills and the bill failed. No. And it wasn't the lack of the majority on the other side in the Senate. It was my friend's party on the other side. Wouldn't even allow it to come to debate. Now my friend talks about very concerned because they spent a lot of time negotiating. You see, I don't really care for omnis. I would never want to see another one on the floor. That's why we did our job. But when it comes to an omni, the minority has as much power. They can say, no, this can't be in it. And they kind of finally came to an agreement. And when they did, my friend on the other side said, I'm worried about trust, so I'm voting against after all these negotiations. And then he brings up, oh my God, the Republicans, they spent money on the military. Sequester has cut more than 20% in the military. You can look back just the last 2 weeks. How many of our men and women died? Not in combat, but in training. How many planes of ours can actually fly today? I will tell you this. The world is not 20% safer while the military has been cut. As we speak today, our Navy is sailing. As we speak today, We're concerned about what's going to happen with Iran. We're concerned what's North Korea going to do, and where is Putin on the march. So yeah, I'm proud of funding the military. And that's why we did it. Did you want to put the other? No, we were held hostage because a minority on the other chambers decided to hold the country hostage. Now, when it comes to rescissions, let's be truthful with the American public. That could be unobligated funds from prior years. So if there is money, just because it was budgeted and appropriated, but they didn't need it all, why don't you save the taxpayers and bring that back to the Treasury?
Will the majority yield?
May I finish? And
Can I just say, did the majority leader hear me say that is a reasonable thing to do?
I look forward to your support because we didn't have it last time.
To my friend.
In these rescissions, we can look at these unnecessary programs. That's healthy for the country. The world changes. We should modernize. We should see. We should make government more efficient and more effective, and most importantly, more accountable. Now, my friend needs to be familiar with this process, because when I look at history, both in 1996 and 1998, the omnibus bills included numerous rescissions that President Clinton proposed and Congress accepted. Now, that was back when you voted for the spending bills, but I'm hopeful you'll be for this rescission as well, because I believe the American public will look at it not as a Republican or Democrat. Every time I watch people run for office, they say, I want to go line by line. 20 years, we didn't have people that wanted to do that in the administration. Today, we do. And I applaud President Trump for saying it, and I applaud President Trump for doing it. Now, you talked about a few other things. You're concerned about debt, I'm concerned about debt. You think there's two different ways to solve this. I believe if we grow the economy, we watch our budget, we can solve this problem. When I look at the revenue coming in, it's hitting its highest level. When I walk across this country and I now see growth of more than 3%, I see unemployment at almost the lowest point in my lifetime. And if you happen to be African American or you happen to be Hispanic, it's the lowest it's been in America. I just saw 800,000 people come back into the workforce. If you look at manufacturing jobs in the last 3 months, we haven't seen that type of growth since 1984. If I look at the last administration and I go and look for the highest growth year under President Obama, it's still lower than the worst year under Bill Clinton. So let's grow and get this deficit taken care of. But what's interesting to me, because I wrote this down because I want to get it right, and you correct me if you think it's wrong. You said whatever we spend, we should pay for it. Is that correct? So this concerns me then. That same budget that you voted for not only increased the deficit by $6.8 trillion over 10 years, it calls for the $3.9 trillion in revenue enhancements. We know what that means. That means tax increases. So you want to increase taxes by $3.9 million, but you want to increase the debt by trillion, but you want to increase the debt by $6.8 trillion. That doesn't meet what you just said. You said whatever we spend, we should pay for it. So you're going to increase the debt almost double, and you're going to increase taxes. That's the difference between us. When we put the tax bill on the floor, and I look at just in one company, 1.2 million of those employees, they got extended their maternity leave. The number of companies that raised what they pay. The electrical bills for Americans in 39 states are now lower because of that tax bill. And let's not even talk about the millions of bonuses that Americans got. That's their own money. And the revenues are coming in higher. The growth is bigger. Our opportunity is greater. But what you want to do is snatch that back. Say, no, government needs it. But you're not saying government needs it to pay off the deficit because you're raising the deficit even higher. It just doesn't work. So what I'm hopeful for, when we come back to this table, and I do believe in trust, but if you're at the table and you make an agreement, come to the floor and be honest. Come to the floor and uphold that agreement that you talked through. Because I'll tell you, I didn't like that bill. Because we voted on all 12 bills here.